Welcome, everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte. What's going on? Mostly 49er people, right? I mean, this isn't going to be a 49er-centric show. We're actually going to fill some different content. So we're taking a break from talking about Deebo Samuel. I'm Jason, as always. Here with my guy Faraz from Upper Hand Fantasy, New Jersey, New York, Connect. Same building. This is like my guy for real in real life, and also very good at what he does when it comes to fantasy football. Faraz, what's going on, bro?
What's up, man? I appreciate you having me, man. This has been a long time coming, to be honest with you. Like, we were supposed to do this like all off season. So I hope we continue to do this because this is going to be fun.
Yeah, for sure. And the good part about this is it blends the portion of, the draft scouting that we all love, and we all love to look at prospects, and that's part of it. And then blend it with the stuff that's really fun, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about fantasy football in terms of, well, guys only care about stats. Well, I'll tell you this. Getting into fantasy football got me into scouting other players, learning depth charts, learning play call tendencies. So a lot of the stuff that I apply to the 49ers content is from fantasy football, because it's way deeper than it's just hoping your guy scores a bunch of points. There's a science to it, and Faraz is really good at what he does.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, no, there definitely is a science, and to be honest with you, like the film goes, a huge way, a long way into like figuring out whether these prospects are. The numbers can say what they say, and I'm a huge numbers guy, but I'm somebody who likes to marry both the film and the numbers together to kind of come to a nice little marriage, right? Like sometimes the statistics don't lie, and you kind of want to take your shots based on the statistics, but at the end of the day, if a guy just doesn't really pop on film to you or to me, I might not favor those guys in dynasty rookie drafts, or that sort of thing. I have my guys, I have my favorites.
Right, absolutely. So, as usual, if you guys are in here, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell for when I go live, and also join the Spicy Squad so you can be in on the call-in show this week. Also, follow my guy Faraz on Instagram, is where you can consume most of his content, Upper Hand Fantasy, and check that description below. It has his channel in there where he does long-form videos explaining players, dynasty dilemmas, prospects, all of those things. It's really, really good content right there. So, I wanted to say that this is going to be more about wide receivers, because wide receivers are my favorite thing to scout, and it's the favorite position of mine. I just think that there's so many different ways the wide receivers can succeed, and I'm so intrigued with the whole route running and all those things. Like, I think it's an art, and it's the easiest thing for me to look at. So I have compiled my top 10 prospects, not for fantasy, but for how I feel. So, I mean, this may be breaking news, and people are going to go and take this and run it all over Twitter and say, well, Jason has this person ranked over this person. I'm going to do that side of it. Faraz has his as well, too, but it's a little bit more in line with fantasy, and we'll talk about the ramifications. Obviously, we don't know where these guys are going to be going. So a lot of what we're doing is just early projections. That sound good to you, Faraz?
Yeah, man. Sounds good to me.
All right, awesome. So we'll start with wide receivers, and then we'll get into running backs. And you guys, if you have questions about players or anybody that you actually want to talk about, feel free to throw it in there. And if you have dynasty questions, things like that, super chats will get pushed to the top. Spicy Squad comments are going to get pushed to the top. So let's start wide receiver rankings. A lot of discussion about who's wide receiver one, right, and for what reasons it would be. And I think that for me, this isn't a disclaimer, but I don't have Jamison Williams number one. And I think that the reason you guys know I don't have Jamison Williams number one is because of an ACL injury. I think all things considered, if he would have got to that national championship, I think he's far and away wide receiver one. So maybe I'm hedging my bet by saying this and, maybe just giving myself an out when he does eventually become wide receiver one and doesn't have to be in the first year. But I've got Garrett Wilson number one. When he runs a 4.38, he's the best separator in my opinion. 2020, he dominated in the slot. 2021, he played a bunch outside. Contested catches, 61.5% in 21. Just smooth route runner. I just think this is the safe number one option just because of the volatility of that injury, even if it is an injury that so many guys bounce back from. Faraz, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Jamison Williams would definitely contend for that number one spot because, listen, like Jamison Williams is somebody who not only – he obviously wins over the top, right? And when you watch him play, you're like, all right, well, he's a speed demon, right? He can win over the top. He can separate with very subtle moves mid-route. Actually, even after his route, right? Forget about the top of his route. Think about mid route when he's already down the field, when he's one-on-one with the safety, when he already beat the corner. He makes these subtle moves to separate over the top, which is something that he does in a way that's super unique. But not only that, he's somebody who can separate on all different types of routes that the NFL asked wide receivers to do in this day and age, right? So Dwayne McFarland, he's an amazing analyst over at PFF, and he came out with this article that talks about staple routes, right? The staple routes are the routes that most NFL teams ask their wide receivers to run, right? Hitch, go in. There's like, I would say probably 9 to 11 routes that receivers run on a normal basis. Well, Garrett Wilson is one of the best in all those staple routes. I think he was open on about 85 or 86% of those staple routes, which is amazing, right? Obviously, right? Like if you're open 86% of the time, and we're not talking about next gen stats when they talk about, how separated are you on a specific target? Like, hey, like I'm going to target this player. So next gen stats records when they get targeted, how separated are they from the closest defender, right? No, this is on every single play, regardless of whether they're targeted or not. So on those routes, Garrett Wilson is the best in this class. And that's part of the reason why he is the most NFL ready. He is the safest. He's the best separator. He has some contested catch ability in him, and he has some big play ability in him. So he's the best all-around wide receiver. And I think he does deserve to be number one. I think he's the safest, and he has a little bit of upside. Does he have like overall wide receiver one fantasy upside? I don't think so, right? Like if I had to project him, I would say, low-end wide receiver one. The guy, like he gives me DJ Moore vibes, right? That's the guy that kind of, comes into my head when I think about Garrett Wilson.
Now you talk about language.
Yeah, and I think that would be great. Like, if he turns into a DJ Moore type of player. Listen, we haven't seen DJ Moore's ceiling yet because he hasn't had a quarterback. But if he does, we'll truly know what that ceiling is. But Garrett Wilson is somebody that I'm super intrigued with. Not only does he kill those staple routes, get open, he actually had the highest yards per route run on those staple routes as well, which is a metric that for me is very important when prospecting these wide receivers and projecting them for the next level.
Absolutely. It made me feel really great. And obviously, I can give a short, succinct reason, and Faraz just takes it to a whole other level. So that's sort of the analysis that you'd be getting over there on Instagram by Upper Hand Fantasy. So, yeah, I've got Garrett Wilson, number one. I'm with you. Number two, I have Jamison Williams. Again, it's less about the skill set. I think that he would have been a slam dunk number one wide receiver if not for the injury in the national championship. Don't think that there's any reason for him to not bounce back. Just I have to when I'm evaluating everything, that kind of just puts him back. And I've got some surprises in my top 10, but overall I've got Jamison 2. Just an absolute burner, incredible acceleration. Even if he comes down a tick from the ACL injury, which the advances in modern sports medicine have been great, and guys have bounced back very fast. So I'm not as worried, but I just in my heart I can't put him in number one just because of the ACL injury. That's all. Even if I am giving myself a cop out.
Hey man, me and you, our top two are matching. We got the same top two guys in order. I have a rookie draft kit that I just came out with this week. And I had those two guys as my top two wide receivers for fantasy purposes. And like you said, maybe Jamison Williams could have been number one. I think he does have, one of the highest upsides out of all of these wide receivers. Now, obviously the explosiveness is real. Now, if you're looking for a guy who's going to make year one impact, that's part of the reason why I have Jamison Williams not down to number two. Year one impact might not be there in terms of like what he's truly capable of in the NFL. So if you're looking for that immediate impact and you have a win now team, maybe you choose to go a little bit safer, right? Potentially get a first year, fantasy wide receiver 2 potentially in Garrett Wilson, right? Even get some upside with Drake London. So with Jamison Williams, he is going to be somebody who has the type of upside that can win you weeks, win you leagues, super quick and shifty off the line, ridiculous with the ball in his hands, can change direction with the best of them. And like I said, it's not just deep, it's short, intermediate, deep. And given how he can separate on those staple routes, he's looking like somebody who is not just that deep threat, but an all-around wide receiver.
Yeah.
And by the
100%.
way, out of all the wide receivers in this class, he actually had the highest percentage of explosive plays per target also, out of all of these prospects. So that that really tells you what kind of player he is.
Right, and there's film of him just cutting through two defenders and beating them over the top. That's just elite speed, coupled with how great of a route runner he is. Again, it's just about the injury for me. And again, we're starting to line up, but I think the discrepancies are going to start to come because my 3 through 6, it's I don't like comparing any of my rankings and going to other places, but yeah, my 3 through 6 is completely different than a few other people. So we're gonna see where we're at. 3, I've got Chris Olave. And he was the number 2 at OSU. And I think that, fluid, effortless. I think that you see all of those things on tape as well. How much of that has to do with Garrett Wilson being there? I wouldn't put too much stock into that. I think that the kid himself can get himself open. You saw the flashes of it with Justin Fields. And then the next year that just passed. So I've got Olave 3rd. What do you think about that one for us?
That's okay, man. Listen, over the past couple of weeks, these top 5 have like moved all around. Like Olave was at number 3 for me at one point, but I'm okay with that. I have him at number 5 right now, behind Drake London and Treylon Burks. But I do think that Olave is one of the best route runners in this class. For me, for fantasy purposes, right? Like for an NFL team, you draft Chris Olave, you got somebody who's going to be super reliable, can play that Z. I wouldn't even be surprised if a team who already has like legit perimeter wide receivers like runs them out of the slot to start. Why not? He can separate with the best of them. He can separate outside. That's fine. Now, if you look at actually, I have it right here. He actually did extremely well in man coverage throughout his career. I can tell you the exact number actually against man in 2021. Chris Olave 3.33 yards per route run, right? And that was only second to one guy, right? So that's legit. His overall yards per route run this past year was the lowest in the entire class. But it also has to do with the other guys that were there, right? Like look at who he was playing with, right? But his career yards per route run of 2.8 is great. Right. So he's been doing it. He actually broke out at 19, right? Unlike Garrett Wilson, who broke out at 20 years old. So for fantasy purposes, you kind of given Chris Olave a little bit of a check there, right? Next to his name. So he's somebody that, he's reliable. He's somebody who can play that Z, play that flanker. I don't think he doesn't translate to an at the next level. But I do think he'll make a very, very solid number 2.
Oh man, so I think the discrepancies are going to keep coming here because number 4, this one's a shocker, and the gentleman that you mentioned before, he's not number 4 for me. And speaking of 4, Sky Moore actually is the guy that I've got number 4. So I think the combine was a little bit of an eye opener for myself. I think that he's tough after the catch, which, the 49er fans, we love to see things like that, even though we have a guy who's like asking to be out because of Instagram. That's obviously a joke, guys. Please relax. Moore is a receiver that, when we look back on, I believe, we're going to look back at this draft and say, man, he kind of fell a little bit too far. Knowing what we know now, why did he go so far back? And I just love the toughness after the catch. And I just think he's going to be one of those guys that surprises people at the next level because of where he is. And again, people are going to doubt him because Western Kentucky, I don't know about the competition. That's something that's incorporated into this. But what I saw when I watched him, and then I think the combine kind of swayed me a little bit more. The guy's got the metrics to go with the toughness. I think that he's going to be somebody that will fall a little bit further. But I think that when we go back and we look at it, we're going to say, man, how the hell does Sky Moore fall to this position or this far away? We had Debo, AJ, and DK all end up in the second round somehow. And we're looking back like, how did that happen? Well, team needs get met in different ways, and different guys cover different people at certain positions. So I just feel like he's going to be that guy. For me, the guy that in terms of the guy that you're going to look back and say, well, why did he fall so far? For me, it was Rashad Bateman. With Baltimore. And I know that he didn't get off to the best start, but I think that this year with a full year of Lamar Jackson and a little bit more of that target share, you're going to start to see him pop out, and we're going to look back at that draft class like, man, Rashad Bateman really slid. So that's the guy that I have pegged for that role, just based on what I saw, at the combine. I really fell in love with his traits. And then it really shows up in terms of his toughness and how good he is after the catch, which is something that when you're looking at Western Kentucky, they're not exactly a powerhouse, not going against the best competition, but I do think that he will be able to take it to the next level when he gets up here.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm a fan of Sky Moore, right? I don't have him ranked up at number 4, but I am a fan of him. He's one of those guys that I'm fighting to put him higher, right? And one of the reasons why is because I just love his tape, right? I love, like, he's one of the guys that when I watch him, I want to watch a guy like Khalil Shakir, like these guys, like, you know, Khalil Shakir is going to be drafted later. Hopefully, these guys are not, you know, day 3 guys, right? That's what you hope for, right? And by the way, like, just a disclaimer to people who play fantasy and dynasty, and you're trying to figure out who to draft and all that. It's very important to understand that draft capital it means a lot, and it actually means way more than you think. Number one, and it matters way more than the landing spot. The landing spot for me doesn't matter as much. Obviously, you want a guy to play with a good quarterback, but landing spots and situations change so dramatically from year to year, right? If you know, you drafted Jerry Jeudy, for example, and then, you know, he's playing with Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, and you knew that was going to happen, you're like, no, I don't want Jerry Jeudy. But like, look, he just got Russ, right? So things are going to change all the time. Just bet on the talent in Dynasty, right? In redraft, is a different story, right? You kind of know a player situation going into that 1 year. It's a different thing. But for Dynasty, for rookie drafts, for evaluating these players, the guys who were drafted, you know, rounds 1, 2, and 3, especially when it comes to running back, those are the guys you want to pay attention to. I'm going to have my favorite guys, right, who are going 4, 5, 6, 7 round in the 7th round, and I'm going to root for them, but I'm not going to bet on them. You know what I'm saying? Same thing for wide receivers. Rounds 1, 2, and 3 is really where it's at. A little bit around 4. It's not a death sentence, but it's honestly not great. Rounds 1, 2, and 3 is really where it's at. All right, I just wanted to put that out there. But yeah, man, Sky Moore is somebody who I'm very intrigued with. He played in the group of 5, right? He didn't play in the Power 5. So that's obviously a knock, like you said. But his 2.92 career yards per route run was one of the best in this class. 3.4 yards per route run in 2021 was the best among every group of 5 wide receiver with at least 100 targets. All right, so he was the best in his entire group. All right, seriously. Elusive, agility, gets off the line really well. Like, that's one of my favorite things about him. I don't think he's going to have trouble with press coverage. Like, he did get bounced off the line a little bit, bounced off his route a little bit on the line. But I think he has a pretty good release, on most of his routes. But I think overall refinement of his like route technique and route tree, growing that route tree a little bit. I never used that together. Growing the route tree, I kind of like that. You know, like you grow a tree, you grow the route tree.
You should
nice,
coin
right?
that.
Nice, right? Nice, right? Yeah,
Coin
grow
it.
the route tree. It's like a growtheroutetree.com. You know what I'm saying?
There it is.
Now, in terms of staple routes, what I mentioned earlier with the other guys, he did pretty good. He still has room to grow, but he's still effective. I don't think he has like this humongous ceiling, but I do think he could be a very productive player. And I think since he's not really a contested catch guy, he doesn't really have – his route tree is really intermediate, right? Short to intermediate routes. So since he doesn't have that deep route tree locked in, I think he can easily start in the slot and be very productive, like straight up, like in year 1. Like, I think he's like a plug and play type of guy, you know?
Yeah.
A guy like him, and then there are guys you can plug in the slot as well. But he's one of the guys who is definitely my favorite for sure.
Yep. And if you guys are just tuning in, shout out to everybody that's in here. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, join the Spicy Squad, all of those things. Make sure you follow this man, and as he is giving out some very key information in terms of where you should be looking at these prospects, in terms of just evaluation and your dynasty and redraft drafts. Follow him on IG, Upper Hand Fantasy. Make sure that you click his channel in the description. So for me, I think that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through my 10 horizon. You give me your pushback, you give me your support, whatever it is. But I think I want you to save your rankings for your draft kit, which you guys should all be finding a way to get your hands on. I mean, this is one of the guys that when I have tough questions, I send them text messages about, yo, what do I do in this draft? And these things, this is a guy that I very much trust, except when we play in the same league, then it's all bets are off. And I kind of try to keep, communication a little bit, slimmer in that way. So let me move on to number 5. And this is gonna, this is where you may start to pick me apart. No, George Pickens apart. There you go. Boom. I just nailed that one. All right.
Like
George
it.
Pickens is who I've got at 5, right? So look, again, this is an injury concern because I would have him higher. I would have him above Sky Moore if it wasn't for the injury. So he's coming back from an ACL, and he came back from an ACL in 21. He just had a small sample size this year. And you can see all the traits and you can see the size. Everything was there. The small sample size is the part that kind of knocks it back just a little bit in that way for me. But I love what I saw. It's just about duplicating that. But I'm going to bet on the traits. I'm going to bet on the ability. And I think that's where I'm going with this. And you kind of talked about it. That has to be part of the formula. And for me, when I watch Pickens, when I took all those other factors in, the injury, you didn't really get to see much. Still, all the tools, everything else is there. And let's see. We'll take this super chat before we get back into George Pickens real quick. So, Faraz HR, shout out to you, man. Thank you for the donation, buddy. Is there a vertical threat specialist that can get on the field we can pick in round 3 or 4? I'm assuming he means the 49ers, and I think that's, where we're going with it. Someone to take the top off of the defense. Do you want to start first at 3 or 4, round 3 or 4, and then I'll give somebody?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if he's going to be available in round 3 or 4, but for me personally, I would pick him around 3 or 4. He's getting a little bit overhyped from my taste, and that's Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati, serious deep threat. People compare him to Jordy Nelson. I feel like he's nowhere close to Jordy Nelson just because these two dudes are white boys who play wide receiver on the outside. Like, it doesn't mean that he's Jordy Nelson. You know what I'm saying?
Who else could he be, though?
That's a really good point.
Right? Like, I mean, outside guys, like Edelman was a slot. Like, I would just keep going.
Super shifty. You know what I'm saying? Right. But anyway, a lot of people are profiling him as like, this guy who is going to potentially like kill it. But I don't think he's exactly what you're saying, HR, like vertical threat specialist, right? A guy, he's actually really good at contested catches as well. So he can take the top off, him deep. He'll make those tough grabs, but he's not somebody who has like an extensive route tree, right? He's not somebody who will separate short to intermediate, but over the top, he's definitely somebody who can. And I'm hoping that he gets to round 3 or 4 because I really hope that he doesn't go earlier and people are like confused, like, what do I do with this guy in fantasy? He's somebody that I'm personally avoiding in rookie mock drafts, for example. I'm sorry, a rookie dynasty drafts, for example. But for real NFL purposes, I think he'll be solid.
Yeah, I've got him number 10 actually, and I think he's 6'3", and I think that he's very fast, and he runs like a slot guy, like one of those shifty slot guys that you're talking about, but at 6'3". And I love the contested catch part. He is getting a little bit overhyped, but I have him at number 10. So that's spoiler alert. We can just, we can go back to George Pickens, who I had at 5, but I have Pierce at 10. And I'll when you see who 9 is, I'll kind of explain it all. But yeah, that's a good one. And Joseph was asking the same thing too about Alec Pierce, and I think that we started to talk about it. But I mean, yeah, that's a good way to look at it. But back to George Pickens, who I have at number 5, as wide receiver 5 in my evaluations. Like, again, it's really about just coming back from the injury in 21 and just a small sample size. What are your thoughts on George Pickens?
I don't know what to do with George Pickens, to be honest with you. Like, he's been all over my rankings. He's somebody who has wide receiver 1 upside, right? And he can play the X. Right. And he can separate in a whole bunch of different ways. Obviously, the injury concerns are huge. So really only had that small sample size early in his career. And to be honest with you, like, if college wide receivers were able to come out after their freshman year, right, he would have been a guy who would have been drafted like in the first round. Right. And he had that in him. Well, we just haven't seen it in a while. So that's my only concern with George Pickens, small sample size. But other than that, I mean, in terms of ability, he has the upside to be the best wide receiver in this class. But unfortunately, from a statistical perspective, like, it's not there, right? 15% dominator rating, over his career, which is one of the lowest in this class. But that's also because, he didn't get as much playing time as these other guys. He didn't get as many chances to have big years. He did break out at 18, which he's one of, I think, 3 other wide receivers to do it. George Pickens is 1. David Bell is the other. Justin Ross is the 3rd to break out at 18. And for fantasy purposes, the earlier you break out, the better, just because simply you're a smaller dude. And if you're 18 going up against 21 and 22-year-old corners and you're winning, that means you're probably good, right? That's what that means. And if you combine that with draft capital, he's going to be drafted most likely in the 2nd round, in day 2. So if that happens, you have to pay attention to him, especially when it comes to fantasy. For me personally, I like what I saw early in his career. We didn't get much. We didn't see much after that. He is explosive on a per target basis. 26% of his targets he had an explosive play on, meaning 15 yards or more, which was tied for like third in this class. Pretty good. And then on top, but his production profile is really the only thing that worries me. But other than that, he has serious upside.
Yeah, and that's how I feel about it too. And this is the part of my, my first real time ranking guys, right? Like I hear people say, yeah, 3 years ago I had him as my wide receiver one. Man, this is my first year doing it. But a lot of this has to do with projecting, right? And still the unknown. And I think that's why he would have been much higher up if he would have had a sample size that was a little bit larger that you can count on and you can take to the bank. But I still see all of those things. That's why I have him at number 5. Here's where you're really gonna start getting mad at me. Number 6, I have Traylon Burks. And here's why. Here's the weirdest part. For me, Traylon Burks has the largest range of outcomes out of everybody, right?
I agree
Like
with
he
you
could
there.
literally, right? Like he could literally be wide receiver 1. He could literally be just a guy, right? Like I just don't know. But from what I saw, and the situation is going to matter a lot. But everybody kept throwing around the Debo comp, which everybody's trying to find their new Debo, right? Everyone wants to find that sort of guy. But I think it was fair in the way that he was used, in the way that he was utilized, the way that they got him the ball in space, and he's great with the ball in his hands. He just needs to sharpen up his route running a little bit more, but I feel that he can do that. And what I saw after the catch, what I saw with the ball in his hands was a guy who is ready to pop a little bit, but at the same time, he's still just a boomer bust guy in my eyes. I still have him at 6. I have him at 6, but I like what I saw when I watched him on film. I really love that toughness, the yards after the catch thing. He can polish up those routes. I think that can definitely happen. But I think that he's ready to go in the next level. I mean, it shouldn't be too much of a concern. But that's the only reason I really have him at 6. I fight myself all the time trying to move him up. I literally just picked George Pickens over him, and I would love to have him over him. But right now, what I saw with the ceiling that I think I kind of know, it's funny. I just told you in one breath, Pickens, I didn't see a large sample size, so I don't know what to project for him. And then Traylon Burks has a sample size, but there's some more things that I want him to work on before I can put him over a guy with those traits in Pickens.
Yeah, you nailed a lot of the good points. Honestly, you mentioned his route running, really iffy. He's one of those guys who you could he knows how to separate, right? And he separates a bunch of different ways, right? The only thing is that a bunch of his opportunity was around the line of scrimmage, right? And that's where those Debo comps come in. His after the catch ability was the best in this class. Him and Jamison Williams, 9.3 yards after catch per reception. I mean, that's crazy. You know what I'm saying? And we know what kind of player Jamison Williams is already. So, there is a huge range of outcomes for him. I do think he has overall wide receiver 1 upside. I do. I think he can be that type of player, but he can bust too. You know what I mean? There are really good comps for him. The numbers do support him. He didn't break out early or anything like that, but 45% dominator rating. You know what I'm saying? 32% career dominator rating, which is the highest in this class. All right. So when you're looking at those numbers, you're like, that stuff pops off. Highest yards per route run out of this entire class from 2021. Career yards per route run, 2.87. Extremely solid. Now, when you look at his yards per route run on staple routes, not as great, right? Because, NFL teams are going to ask him to run routes that he just doesn't run. So I think in his situation, landing spot does matter, right? But it's like, where would he land where you're like, and I said earlier that landing spot doesn't matter as much. I think for him, it's a different story. Mm-hmm. Where would he land? Like, obviously, everyone's going to say San Francisco, right? But like, where would he land where you're like, all right, like, I think he'll be used the way that I want him to be used? Me personally, I can't think of a team. You know what I'm saying? Because it really, it doesn't, I'm not looking for a precedent. You know what I'm saying? Like, everyone needs a precedent to know whether a coach is going to use a player a certain way, right? Shanahan used Debo the way that he did, and now everybody knows that Shanahan would use a player like that, just like he did with Debo. But he didn't have Debo before. We couldn't project Debo to do what he's doing right now with Shanahan before he got there. Maybe some people did. I don't know. But I wouldn't have. And I know with Traylon Burks, like, he might be used in a way that we didn't foresee by a coach that we didn't predict would do that or had it in him. So it's like it's really tough. We can pretend and we can think that we know what a coach will do with a player, and be like, hey, he did it with this guy, he might do it with him too. But it's really hard to tell, whether a coach would actually do that, right? But in terms of like range of outcomes, it's huge. But if you are swinging for the fences, you are looking for upside. You have a dynasty roster that doesn't have, it's not top heavy at all, and Traylon Burks is still like draftable at the end of the first round in your rookie draft. I'm taking that. I'm taking that swing, dude. I'm taking that swing for the upside.
Yep, absolutely, 100%. So the next one I have is Drake London, and it's less about the player. I think he's going to be fine, and he's so that means we're up to 7 at this point. Um, the ankle injury kind of put him behind for me in part of the process. I would have loved to have seen him run on the ankle. The top end speed is a bit of a concern, but that's not how he wins. He wins in contested catches, and a lot of the stuff that sometimes we get in our heads about as negatives, it kind of outweighs the positive. And what I mean by that is when you see a wide receiver and he's not flashy at the top end with his speed and everything, oh, well, he's going to be too slow to separate. He's not going to, well, different guys win in different ways. And he wins with contested catches. And that doesn't mean that if you pair him somewhere else that it's not going to work or anything like that because he can't run. I just think that when we fall in love with certain traits, it becomes a positive for one guy, and then you tend to overlook all the negatives because you're like, oh, he's fast and he can separate. But when it's a guy that's a little bit slower, people get a little bit hesitant. My hesitation is less about the top end speed and more about the ankle injury and how it kind of put him back a little bit. And he's already not fast to begin with. For me, I think he's going to be fine. I just am not as bullish as other people are. And I think you kind of alluded to where you have him a little bit earlier. So talk to me about Drake London and what you think.
Yeah, I think he is one of the guys who has the most upside in this class. I think between him and Jamison Williams and Traylon Burks, like those three guys have the most upside in terms of, I think Garrett Wilson probably has like the least amount of variance, right, between his upside and his downside. I think number 2 on that list between, upside and downside with the least variance is Drake London. And then, out of the guys who have the highest upside, then Traylon Burks is obviously he has this huge variance in terms of what his upside and downside are. But Drake London, I feel like, is a safe pick. I think I wouldn't be surprised if he's the overall wide receiver 1, in a couple of years, right? Like you can't be surprised if that's the case, right? He's strong, he's big, he's versatile, right? Remember, before this past year, he was playing in the slot, right? With Amon-Ra St. Brown, with Michael Pittman, and he still broke out early at 19 years old out of the slot. And then he dominated on the outside this past season. 3.52 yards per route run in 2021. That was the best in this class, right? His 3.42 yards per route run against man coverage. That's not a huge drop off right there. That's even more impressive, right? So for a big guy, solid after the catch, right? Like what did he get after them? 5.2 yards after the catch for a big dude like him. That's not bad at all. Solid and explosive plays. Now, again, on staple routes, wasn't amazing. Wasn't like Garrett Wilson and Olave and Jamison Williams, but he was solid, good enough. So his production profile is pretty good. Broke out early enough. He's pretty efficient. And he can, like you said, he can win in different ways. And honestly, he gets off the line better than people give him credit for. And he can separate off the top of his route a little bit more than people give him credit for. So I don't think he's just a contested catch guy. He did well in that department, and I'm hoping that he doesn't just turn into like a JJ or Arcega-Whiteside type of dude, or those type of guys. But I just think that for his size, he's a good route runner. I've seen him separate without really using his power. So I'm honestly I'm fine taking him. I think he could potentially be an alpha wide receiver right off the get.
Yep, and I've got him at number 7. So, it's going to be good to go look back at these things and see where we landed, where we got it wrong. And I think that's the fun part of the evaluation process. Everybody's in a rush to get it right, but they're in a rush to get it right on the first try. And I'm super excited to figure out where these guys land so I can say, man, Jay, you kind of nailed this one, but you messed this one up, and you should never let that get in the way of your process over and over.
And it kind of sucks because I had a deadline for myself to when I put the rookie draft kit out, right? And now it's on wax, right? It's on a PDF, right? It's not on my website. So I am coming out with a version 2 after the NFL draft is done, so I can kind of consider landing spot
now.
Yeah, I kind of have an idea using grind of the mocks. You kind of get an expected draft, capital off of that, but like actually knowing what the draft capital is, knowing what team they're on, things change a little bit. So I'll be coming out with version 2 of the draft kit, early May. But I think it's one of those things where if I'm going to be looking at the landing spot for these guys, it better be like Aaron Rodgers, right? It better be Patrick Mahomes, right? Like those type of guys are going to move the needle, right? If
Right.
Chris Olave goes to the Chiefs, I'll be very excited about that.
Or it goes to the Packers. Oh God, man, no.
Yeah,
I don't like
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I mean, they're both
No,
going to be in the
in
market.
terms of fantasy, as a 49ers fan with that
Yeah.
hat on, like it's not like you don't want like as an NFL fan, you don't want anybody to go to any team. You don't want any good players to go anywhere.
Someone said that
San
to me on
Francisco.
Twitter too, and I was like, "Ah, man, you're right. Like, yeah, that is a good way to look at it. Like they're like, oh man, I hope Olavi goes there or something." I was like, no, I don't want that, but they wanted it for purely football things. So yeah,
Yeah, no, yeah. So
um,
I had London at 3, and I had you had Traylon Burks. I had Traylon Burks at 4.
wow. So yeah, we've
Yeah.
got a vast difference, and that's why you guys need to check out his draft kit as well. As you see, Faraz is very informed, man. One of the smartest guys I know. For anybody who's just joining, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Faraz's channel, which is in the description. Make sure you follow him on Instagram so you can get more hard-hitting information. We are going through our wide receiver prospects. I am unveiling my prospect wide receiver 1 through 10, so you guys can pick this apart and we're giving fantasy advice where Faraz is breaking it down in that way. Me, I'm just going off the guys that I think are, 1 through 10, in my opinion, and then we're going to take it from there. So we're on 7. Number 8 is a name that, Faraz, you know very well. Jalen Tolbert out of South Alabama. Got a chance to see him at the Senior Bowl. And when you hear South Alabama, it's usually like that with these obscure schools. The first thing that's going to come to your mind is competition, right? What do you do with the competition? How do you gauge all those things? Well, when the competition picked up, he picked up. And that's something that's really important to watch, right? When you go to the Senior Bowl, you have top-end guys going to, these high-end schools that are going to be going really early. How do you adapt? Can you hold your own? Does your game rise? And that's what I noticed there as well too, man. Just very fluid, natural good guy too as well too. So like no character issues, nothing like that. I don't know why that matters when it comes to the prospect thing. I mean, an NFL team would worry about that, but it's something about the kid that he seems like he's hardworking. He talked about when we asked him a question at the Senior Bowl about watching a bunch of guys, but never really comparing himself to anybody, trying to take a little bit from everybody. So the kid seems like a hard worker. I really was impressed with what I saw in Mobile. I've got him at number 8. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and at that press conference after the game, I asked him, I said, yo, like, what do you think about, you playing at that small school and everyone talking about your level of competition? And he was tired of it, man. He's just like, yo, like, I got that chip on my shoulder. Like, I'm tired of people talking about that. Like, I'm gonna prove him wrong. Like, he was dead serious. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't looking at him with a smile on his face, nothing. He was like dead serious. So I can see it, man. He looked really good. He was one of my favorite wide receivers at the Senior Bowl. Him, Christian Watson, like, they were doing the thing, Khalil Shakir. But Tolbert, like, he looked different, man. He really did. My only concern with Tolbert is his draft capital. Like, when is he going to get drafted, right? He's going to have to pull an Amon-Ra St. Brown type of thing. St. Brown was drafted in the 4th, right? But that is an anomaly, right? That's an anomaly for someone like him in the 4th round to have the type of production that he did towards the end of last season in their rookie year, nonetheless. Usually that doesn't happen, right? It did take some opportunity for him to see the field as much as he did, St. Brown. But, he looks like he belongs, right? So Jalen Tolbert, in terms of production profile, like it's might be like one of the best in this class, to be honest with you. Like if I'm looking at his numbers here, let's see. So I gave him a production grade of like 9.2, out of 10. He had the most yards in this class, over his career. In those staple routes I was talking about earlier, he was number 2 to Sky Moore in yards per route run. Now, keep in mind that both of these guys, right, didn't play in the Power 5, right? That's something to keep in mind. But Tolbert, this past year, 3.84 yards per route run. I mean, that's just bananas, like against man coverage, right? Almost 4 yards per run against man. He separates in a lot of different ways too, man. He is good against bump and run. A lot of NFL teams in the beginning thought that he had to gain a little bit of weight to fill out his frame. But it turns out he's actually 2 inches shorter than what he was listed at in college. So teams aren't, teams aren't as worried about it because the BMI kind of levels out at that point. They just thought that he was this lanky dude. And we saw him in Mobile. Like, he was a lanky dude. He was solid. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, he was.
I don't think that should be a concern. 42% dominator rating throughout his career. No, I'm sorry, 30% dominator rating throughout his career. That was second in this class. 42% dominator rating overall. That was second in this class. He didn't break out early or anything like that. He was a senior. His best seasons were as a senior, so that's a little bit concerning. But he does have an overall skill set that I think could translate. He actually, he can be one of those guys who is taken late and competes for the X receiver role, right? And there's not a lot of guys you can say can do that, right? If you're drafting a guy in the 4th, 5th round, you're looking at potential flankers, maybe guys who play out the slot, but not a guy who can play the X, right? But he's somebody who might be different, and he's somebody who can compete for that role.
Yep, I love it, man. Jalen Tolbert, my number 8 wide receiver. My number 9 wide receiver is somebody who is loved by all 49ers fans because they want to pair him with his former quarterback and capture magic like Jamar Chase and Joey Burrow, which I don't think that's the proper way to be evaluating it. But I've got Christian Watson, number 9 from NDSU. Look, right now his hype is out of control. It's just out of control right now at this point. Like, it's self-sustaining. It's gone. Like, ask somebody to say something bad about Christian Watson, and you're probably going to be labeled a hater. For me, I've got him at number 9. I just think he's a little bit raw. He's betting right now. I'm betting right now on his traits right now, what I'm betting on. For me, what I want to see him do a little bit better is be better with contested catches. Shout out to Straight Niner Empire for becoming the newest member of the Spicy Squad. Appreciate you, bro. I know 49er fans love the idea of Christian Watson. Unfortunately, guys, the hype has gotten too big. He's not going to be anywhere near where the 49ers are going to be at a 61 unless they make a drastic move up. As we talked about it at the back end of the first round, I don't see him leaving the first round with Green Bay, Kansas City, having a need right there. So it's going to be hard for him to fall. I don't think that's going to happen unless somebody has a gas mask picture. I'm just joking. He's a great kid. I would never want to put that on him. Trust me. If you think he's a great player, you think he's got great, traits, he's a much better person, very well-spoken, very approachable guy. I spoke to him in Mobile at the Combine. He's always willing to give people his time. Great kid. It's just he's a little bit raw when it comes to some of his routes, and I just need to see him do a little bit more with contested catches. But right now, unfortunately for 49ers fans, the dream of pairing him back up with his quarterback probably are dead at this point unless something drastically changes. What do you think for us?
I personally think that the only reason you have him at number 9 is because all these 49ers fans been chirping in your ear, talking about Christian Watson needs to come to Niners, and you're just like, yo, like,
give the people what they want, man.
No. I think you're just like, I want to be the bad guy. I want to be the bad guy, and I want to rank him as low as possible so that all these 49ers fans can come at me. You just like
no, I don't. I hate that actually. I've taken such a step back from Twitter because the Deebo Samuel discourse has completely gone off the rails. And you don't have to announce to people that you're leaving Twitter, right? Like, oh, I'm taking a break. How you take a break from Twitter? You stop tweeting. Like, you don't have to tell anybody. So I just stayed away from it for a little while. I'm definitely not trying to invite any of that at this point. The one thing I will say about Deebo Samuel, and I'll let you get back to Christian Watson, is thank God he's taking the onus off of talking about Jimmy Garoppolo because that was the only other discussion that I find more unbearable at this point. But go ahead for us with Christian Watson.
Yeah, no,
I'm not trying to play the bad guy here.
Listen, man, you definitely are. All right, so for me, like, obviously Christian Watson, size, speed, like freak, right? He absolutely killed the Combine, right? So I'm sure all these 49ers fans got super hyped because of that too. But we saw him in Mobile. He did well, man. He did well, and like when you really dig into the practice tape too, like we obviously saw him in person, but we didn't see him when he was in the indoor practice. And the indoor practice was that red zone practice, and the dude separates, man. It's not just his size. He knows how to separate. He knows how to release off the line, and like it's just unique, right? It's something unique at his size, the way that he's able to do it. So he's just a freak athlete, and that's really what's propelling him in mocks right now, in NFL draft mocks. And there's a very likely chance that he ends up, at the end of the first round, early second round. Would I grade him like that? No. I am ranking him relatively high. Where do I have him? And I'm ranking him high because of the draft capital. I have him at 6, which is really high. That's really high, and I think I had him lower too. But the reason why I have him higher now is because of the draft capital and how much I actually weigh the draft capital into. I don't know where he's going to go, but if you compile all of the mock drafts that have been done by all the experts and stuff like that, that's kind of where he's going. Late first, early second. So I'm okay, drafting him like in the middle of the second round in rookie dynasty drafts. I'll be honest with you, I'm not excited about that. You know what I'm saying? It's more like, we know that he has a freak ability, right? We know he has upside. We know that he was like literally the best receiver in the FCS, right? He didn't play in the FBS, so we don't know what kind of player he's going to be. He did well at the Senior Bowl against FBS corners and Power 5 corners, especially like in practice, like when he was like doing 1-on-1s and shit, like he was killing it.
That's more important to me than the game.
Yeah, 100%. Because the game is just like is limited reps, right?
These guys are rotating.
Yeah, these guys are rotating in and out, so it's not like he was on the field on every play, right? And he made a really good play too in the Senior Bowl, but that's besides the point. Also, like after talking with him so many times at the Senior Bowl, like I feel like we're friends now.
All right.
Now, at least I think we're friends. I mean, I don't know if he thinks we're friends, but I think we're friends. And I just feel like I gotta have him at 6. Hard hitting analysis right there.
I hear you though. That's the thing that I'm trying to separate myself from, because like we've spoken to these people. Like I got to see Christian at the Senior Bowl, spoke to him, then we got to see him at the combine, and he's just so nice. And it's like, yeah, man, I feel the same sort of way. Like Christian's like, oh, there goes Jason. Like if he sees me at the draft or something like that, like he sees me in Vegas, oh, there's Jason. No, he doesn't know my name or anything like that. But it's hard to get away from those feelings, especially when you have that face-to-face interaction, which is a lot of what general managers, when we talk to them and we talk to people at the combine and we're talking to all the front office people, goes into the evaluation process a lot, is that face-to-face interaction and that feeling that you get. Obviously, you ask them football questions, but a lot of that is the way that evaluators go about things, right? So, I mean, whether that's a good or a bad thing, we have similar feelings when it comes to that, just because it's really cool to talk to people that are going to wind up playing NFL football in a few months and for a football team. Like, it's still really cool.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, for sure. Now, and with Christian Watson too, one thing I want to talk about is if I'm evaluating a player out of the FCS, he better look like he's the best player there, and at least he checks that box, right? He does look like he is the best wide receiver there. He looks like he's a man amongst boys, right? In the FCS, like nobody can cover him. So it's one of those situations where like, okay, like he doesn't belong there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, straightening our empire, just joined the Spicy Squad. His first comment, early second for Mr. Watson. Personally, this year we may see 14 wideouts taken in the first 2 rounds, which would be #record. That would make me, a wide receiver guy, super happy, because I love that. So, gone through 9. This will be the 10th. Again, if you guys are just joining, I'm joined by Faraz from Upper Hand Fantasy. Guys, check out his Instagram. All these great numbers, all these things, all this content is there for you. He has a draft kit out there. Also, go below into the description. Sub his YouTube channel. So much good analysis, long form videos about dynasty questions, keep or trade. I mean, anytime I ask anybody about dynasty or a player, and I think it was Lawrence Lord posted that video. It was perfect. It's literally, you got to sell this player. Everything is sell. But I think you get some fair and balanced analysis from Faraz. And I say that not just because he's my friend, because he is genuinely one of the smartest guys in this right now. So number 10. And then we'll do maybe like one more sleeper, and then I guess we'll call it. I mean, we should just leave this one about wide receivers, and then maybe next week we can dive into running backs, and we're getting closer to the draft anyway, or maybe we'll do another show, something like that. I like the idea of where we're at right here. We're almost at an hour. I think we've touched on a lot of good points, and people can now pick apart my top 10 and say whatever the hell they want about it, because I have actually put them out there. Good God, I'm sweating. Once I'm done here, man, I'm gonna go take a shower. Like I'm sweating under all this right now. But number 10. I told you guys about it a little bit earlier, Alec Pierce, man. I think that he's everything that the 49ers want, with somebody who can take the top off of defense. But when you pair that with 6'3", some very good ball skills, I think that it is a good fit for the 49ers in the 3rd or 4th round, as HR alluded to. The problem being now, has the hype pushed him out of the 49ers range and kind of changed those things? Because one shoe that 49ers fans were waiting to fall a little bit in terms of what they were going to do in the draft was, what's going to happen with Mike Mcgrinchey? Well, Mike Mcgrinchey heard all those questions about his weight. What is he going to be doing? He took to Twitter today. I mean, he took to Instagram today He puts up a video of him running, and he's up at 310. So maybe right tackle's off the board so the 49ers can do some luxury things. They're meeting with a bunch of running backs. Now they can address skill positions now that they only really have 3 or 4 wide receivers that are reliable on the roster right now that have NFL experience that you can trust. So Alex Pierce is a really, really, I guess, popular name now, as the 49ers won't be looking to invest high draft capital in a wide receiver, being that 61 is a place where they can get a safety or possibly an edge or even an offensive lineman. But I like Alec Pierce, but I feel like right now that hype is a little bit overblown. What do you think, Faraz?
I'm with you, man. Listen, I'm not a fan of Alec Pierce at all. Like,
wow.
I have 17 wide receivers in my rookie draft kit, and he's ranked number 16.
Wow.
Like, yeah. Now, like I said earlier, I think Alec Pierce is somebody who can help an NFL team way more than he can help my fantasy team, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's one of those guys, like, you play in best ball, right? He'll give you like 3 catches and, on like 85 yards, right? And then the next game, he'll have like 2 catches for like 13 yards, right? He's like one of those type of players, but he makes a huge impact, whether he catches the ball or whether he's targeted or not, because he can stretch the defense, right? And I think that's NFL teams, think about one of the reasons that Christian Kirk got paid so much money is because he's very versatile and he can take the top off the defense. I think he's very, very underrated as a deep threat, right? He's not looked at like that. He's looked at the slot wide receivers.
He's making all that money?
No, he's just underrated as a deep threat.
Yeah.
He's overrated right now. Okay. I'm a fan of Christian Kirk. I am. But like the money that they gave him was absolutely ridiculous. But I'll say this. One of the reasons why Christian Kirk was so valued in free agency is not just because he's a good productive slot wide receiver, is because he could potentially go deep, right? And that's guys who can go deep are just more valuable, because they affect the offense whether they catch the ball or not. They open things up underneath. Look, it's what Tyreek Hill did for the Chiefs. Like, look at how open these guys were, right underneath. All Patrick Mahomes was doing at one point in the season was just chuck it down to wide open running backs and tight ends. So, I think he makes a big impact NFL wise. For fantasy, I think he's a one-trick pony. So I don't think he's somebody that I'll be going after. This is what I'll read you what I wrote about him. My last paragraph, I have blurbs in my rookie draft kit. Not only do I have 9 grades for each player, I have their rookie ADP. I have whether I'm targeting them, avoiding them, whether they're sleepers. I have those tags up there. I also, in addition to the grades, I have a blurb for each player. And here's what I wrote about Pierce. There is definitely a role for a Pierce type player on every NFL team, a field stretcher who will make more of an impact than just making plays. I don't think it'll translate to a ton of fantasy success unless he's matched with an exceptional quarterback. I won't be targeting Pierce in fantasy rookie drafts. And that's basically it. So I do think he's going to be overdrafted in NFL terms as well. Mm-hmm. But, for the 49ers, if you guys need a deep threat, he's one of the guys that I would be targeting.
Yeah, and I think I like this exercise because I'm purely just trying to evaluate them 1 through 10, and then we're giving fantasy implications, which is why there's definitely discrepancies in the way that I'm sure Faraz would have done 1 through 10, regardless of fantasy, right? Like if we were doing this in the same thing, I don't think we would have come up with 10, and I think that's what makes this exercise so good, is you're trying to figure out what people value, what people don't. But it's good that we're doing this now because then it puts a light on dynasty value where you're looking for them in rookie drafts because rookie drafts are right around the corner. Like I'm in 2 dynasty leagues that are literally once the draft is done, once the draft is over, literally they're gonna like kick off the other ones, and hopefully I'll be awake in Vegas or something like that to be able to even like get that done. But yeah, so 53 minutes in, we can give 2 sleepers, one sleeper that you have at wide receiver that's not exactly in your top 10, somebody that you really like. I don't have to explain my love for Calvin Austin anymore. You guys kind of know. I got.
I have Calvin Austin at 15, by the way. So George, I think you mentioned George Pickens. I'm sorry. David Bell is somebody who is not exciting at all. Like when you watch him play, not exciting, right? But
traits-wise.
Traits-wise, athletic profile is like complete, like it's terrible. But the dude just gets it done, man. Like think of Michael Thomas. Like, think of like the type of routes Michael Thomas runs. He wins on short to intermediate routes. He could be an X receiver, and he's just simply productive. The dude, I think he broke out when he was 18. Am I right? Yeah. So he's one of 3 wide receivers who out of this class who broke out at 18. And then he hit a 30% breakout age at 19, and he's the only wide receiver in this class to do that. And what that means for the people who don't know what the breakout age means is that 30% breakout age means that he was 19 when he himself was responsible for 30% of the offense's production in terms of yardage and touchdowns. So that's legit. You know what I mean? You can't deny that production. So his production profile is really good. Now, his efficiency isn't as good as the other receivers, so you kind of knock him down for that. But he did play well in man coverage, so he was efficient there. And yeah, not great in the staple routes, but his production profile was serious. So he's one of those guys who's going to get draft capital, somebody that you need to pay attention to. Not a sexy pick at all in rookie drafts. I'm not telling you to draft him in rookie drafts. He's not even a target of mine. But what I'm saying is that the draft capital matters, and if you draft it in the 2nd round or the 3rd round, you have to pay attention to him.
Yep, absolutely. I love that. And James has a comment. Sleeper wide receiver I've had down for a month. 49ers just met with Danny Gray from SMU. These are all good. These. So when we say sleeper, we're talking about the people that aren't going to be on anybody's top 15. They're not going to be in their top 20, but they do have a chance to break in to those ranks. May not have wide receiver 1 overall. We're talking about like upside or anything like that, but these are guys that can contribute, and situation matters so much, especially when we're talking about fantasy. So like that call, like the Danny Gray call, my guy and my sleeper, I already talked about Calvin Austin enough. You guys know that. I think that hopefully the 49ers find a way to get that done, but if they don't, somebody else that they can get to, and this is a little bit of bias because he goes to school here in Jersey, is Bo Melton. And if you don't know where Bo Melton went, it was Rutgers. So 4.3440 and New Jersey, man. I mean, look, he's got some plays on tape that are spectacular. Field stretcher, big guy. He didn't really show out at Senior Bowl. I'll say that. Like, he wasn't really, like, catching a lot of passes. He didn't really, show anything where I was like, oh, look at that, especially when we were watching one-on-ones. But when you start to look at the way, again, we're talking about prospects and we're talking about fits and things like that. And again, sneakily, I'm thinking about the 49ers in the back of my mind and who could be that. Bo Melton is somebody who has all the traits, has some very spectacular plays, could be somebody who is a steal later on in drafts because he's not really being spoke about as much.
Yeah, no, I hear you. His brother, I think his brother's a corner, also at Rutgers, coming out next year. Supposed to be a baller. Like he might go on in the 1st, 2nd round. Supposed to be a baller. But there's a question here for Upper Hand Fantasy. What do you think about Calvin Turner? Yo, I don't even know who that is, man.
Thank you for putting us on. Straight look, newest member of the Spicy Squad. He putting us on to some people. So straight down to Empire, we're gonna take a look at that guy, and I'm gonna write that down. Calvin Turner.
I'm gonna write it down right now too. Calvin Turner. Is that your guy? I want to know. Like, is that your guy? He's a receiver. I haven't looked at him. I haven't watched any film on him. Played at Jacksonville University.
That's probably why.
No, okay. Who plays? No, University of Hawaii. Oh, okay.
Hawaii.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna look into that. I don't even know who that is.
Right.
Straight up.
And James says, I've seen Bo mocked to the 49ers in the 7th round. So
interesting.
Yeah. Good discussion. Again, guys, thank you guys for tapping in. Not really the crowd that we normally get because this is us straying away from strictly 49ers content just because we're at a standstill right now with things that are happening and what you could be, talking about because you're either talking about Debo or you're complaining about Instagram. So right now, I felt like this is a good time to, 1, show you guys how smart Faraz is, and 2, talk about prospects and give my top 10 guys for the draft. And I'll go over them again. Number 1, Garrett Wilson. Number 2, Jamison Williams. Number 3, Chris Olave. Number 4, Sky Moore. George Pickens, number 5. Traylon Burks, number 6. Drake London, number 7. Tolbert, number 8. Christian Watson, 9. Alec Pierce from Cincinnati, number 10. Those are my prospects going into the draft, not fantasy purposes, just 1 through 10, wide receiver 1 through 10, how I have it. And Faraz was giving fantasy feedback as well, too. So, Faraz, anything else that you want to promote? Talk to the people where they can find you. And I know we've said it, but, we've got some more people that have jumped in for the people who are new to any of your content.
Yeah, I mean, you can hit me up over on Instagram at Upper Hand Fantasy. You can hit the YouTube channel, Upper Hand Fantasy, over there as well. Yeah, that's pretty much it, man. Just hit me up wherever you can. The content's pretty much everywhere at this point.
Draft kit.
Yeah, hit the draft kit too if you want. You know what I'm saying? Shop.upperhandfantasy.com. Or you can use the code upperhand on Underdog Fantasy. And if you're in this stream right now, you get the draft kit for free. Just hit me up on Instagram.
There you go.
Hit the DMs.
Right, and so many of our audience, they follow Croc. He's an Underdog Fantasy guy. You guys are on the same team. That was pretty cool to see you guys in the same tweet and the team that you guys are building over there.
Yeah, man. We just had a little meeting today, man. He's doing good, man. I'm happy for him.
Yeah. Croc's the man. We love him over here. So yeah, if you guys haven't joined Underdog Fantasy under the influence of Croc, now maybe you should under the influence of Faraz as well too, and you get that draft kit too, man. So that sounds good to me. So thank you guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys follow Faraz everywhere. Instagram, his channel is in the description. Shout out to the Spicy Squad. Shout out to everybody that was in here liking, commenting the entire time, guys. Appreciate you. A little bit more of this content will be littered in as we get closer to the draft so we can, not bang our head against the wall with the same topics over and over. But for Faraz and for Jay, we'll check you out in a bit. Have a good one. Welcome, everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte.